You know, usually when we talk about gathering information, like walking into a traditional library, there's this underlying expectation of structural safety.
Right.
You walk in, you understand the categorization, you go to the nonfiction section, you pull this heavy cloth-bound encyclopedia off the shelf, and you just sort of, well, you trust the process.
Yeah, you assume someone's already done the hard work.
Exactly. You're operating under the assumption that an editor scrutinized the text, a dedicated fact-checker verified the claims, and a publisher ultimately put their professional reputation on the line to print it.
The burden of proof has basically been met before the physical object even reaches your hands. I mean, you're walking into a highly curated environment protected by established gatekeepers.
Yeah.
There's a real chain of accountability.
But then you step out of that library and into the world of our daily digital feeds, and that chain of accountability it completely evaporates.
It's just gone.
Yeah. We're navigating an unregulated fire hose of information. It's a landscape completely devoid of those traditional gatekeepers, and it requires a completely different set of survival skills.
It really does.
Which is why we are unpacking a fascinating and honestly incredibly urgent brief today. It's titled Day 34, Fake News and Cyber Propaganda. And our mission for you on this deep dive is to shortcut your path to understanding the invisible architecture of misinformation.
And we're not just looking at the surface level definitions here, right?
No, not at all. We're breaking down the psychological traps it sets, the algorithmic velocity it relies on, and, the specific habits you can use to armor up against it.
And I think we should establish right up front that understanding this architecture isn't about fostering paranoia.
Right.
Because if you understand the plumbing of a house, you don't panic every time you turn on a faucet.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. Once you see how digital information is actually engineered to flow, you can navigate these platforms with so much more confidence and clarity.
So let's jump right into the mechanics of that flow, because the material points out something that genuinely subverted my expectations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like when you picture a major misinformation campaign, you probably visualize, I don't know, a sophisticated hacker collective operating out of a dark server farm somewhere.
Like a movie villain setup.
Exactly. Or massive, shady websites broadcasting fake news globally. But the reality is far more intimate. The most dangerous vector for misinformation isn't some distant website. It's sitting in your pocket right now.
Yep.
It's your personal messaging apps, like the intimate family group chats.
And the proximity of the threat is what makes it so incredibly effective. We're hardwired to perceive threats as external,
Right.
like the stranger on the street or the unfamiliar sketchy website.
Right, something outside the tribe.
Exactly. But the analysis specifically identifies closed messaging platforms as primary engines of global misinformation. Think about the sheer scale of platforms like WhatsApp or Telegram,
Massive.
especially in developing tech markets, where these apps essentially are the internet for billions of people. They are deeply woven into the fabric of daily, mundane communication. You aren't receiving a broadcast from a stranger. You're receiving a direct message from your uncle or your best friend or a community leader.
Which fundamentally alters the way we process the information. It seems like the core formula at play here is essentially blind trust combined with instant sharing capability.
That's the recipe.
I was trying to visualize this dynamic, and the closest parallel I can draw is like a family potluck dinner.
Okay, I like this. Walk me through the mechanics of that potluck.
So imagine you're at this massive family gathering. Someone hands you a plate with a slice of pie on it. You eat the pie without a second thought.
Right, because it's at the family party.
Exactly. Why do you eat it? Because your aunt handed it to you. You've known her your entire life. She loves you. She cares about your well-being. But what you don't realize in this scenario is that your aunt didn't actually bake the pie.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Right. She bought it from an anonymous vendor operating out of the trunk of a car 3 towns over, and she never bothered to check the ingredients before serving it to the family.
That's terrifying, actually.
Yeah. When a message lands in your phone from a relative, it's wearing a mask of trustworthiness. You implicitly trust the quote-unquote food because of the person who handed you the plate.
That perfectly illustrates the cognitive vulnerability we're dealing with. We are constantly conflating our trust in the person with our trust in the information.
Wow. Yeah, conflating the two.
Right. If a parent sends a health warning to their child's phone, the child's brain instantly associates that text with a lifetime of parental care and protection. It entirely bypasses the brain's critical thinking filter. You aren't evaluating the empirical validity of the claim. You are implicitly evaluating your emotional relationship with the sender.
And the sender isn't operating out of malice. I mean, they genuinely think they're bringing a good pie to the potluck.
They're trying to help.
Let's look at the specific, everyday examples the brief highlights. The first one is the classic ubiquitous health myth. Something along the lines of, drink hot water every morning to cure all internal diseases.
Right.
On the surface, that sounds completely harmless, quaint even.
It sounds quaint until you analyze the underlying mechanics of why it spreads so rapidly. I mean, why a hot water cure?
Because everyone has hot water.
Exactly. It's universally accessible, it costs absolutely nothing, and it mimics the cadence of traditional folk wisdom. It explicitly targets a fundamental human survival instinct, the desire for health and longevity, and it pairs it with a completely frictionless solution.
Just boil the kettle.
Yeah. So when someone forwards that to 20 family members, they're experiencing a psychological reward. They feel like they have actively contributed to the survival and well-being of their tribe.
The intent is care, but the second example highlighted has a completely different emotional flavor. It's the one that says, this specific bank is shutting down operations tomorrow morning. Withdraw your funds immediately.
Yeah, that one is rough.
That isn't about care. That's a targeted panic inducer.
It's basically an amygdala hijack. It targets the primal fear of immediate resource loss. Put yourself in the position of the recipient for a second.
Okay.
You wake up, you're groggy, you check your phone, and a trusted friend has sent you a warning that your life savings are about to vaporize.
My heart rate is going up just thinking about it.
Right. You do not have the time or, honestly, the cognitive bandwidth in that state of panic to call the bank's corporate headquarters and verify their liquidity. The urgency that is artificially engineered into the message overrides your standard verification process.
You just react.
Exactly. The only rational immediate action from a perspective of panic is to forward it to warn others in your network.
And the third common example sort of flips the script from panic to financial lore. The classic message claiming a government agency has suddenly announced a massive cash payout scheme and providing a link to register.
Ah, the classic scam.
Yeah. This is preying on hope, or in many cases, desperate financial need.
Notice the architecture of that specific lie, though. It leverages the perceived authority of a quote-unquote government agency to lower your guard, and it promises an unearned, significant reward.
Right.
But whether the message is triggering care with a health myth, terror with a bank collapse, or hope with a financial lure, they all share one critical structural element. They demand an immediate response.
They don't want you to think about it.
They are not designed to be pondered. They're designed to prompt action. And in a closed messaging app, the path of least resistance is simply hitting forward.
So that outlines the decentralized, often accidental spread of misinformation through well-meaning networks. But the material takes a very sharp, deliberate pivot here.
It does.
Because what happens when this existing ecosystem of instant sharing and blind trust is intentionally weaponized? That brings us directly to the deliberate manipulation of the democratic process through cyber propaganda.
Yeah, we shift from the accidental spread of rumors to the industrialized engineering of deception.
Now, before we dig into the mechanics of political manipulation, we need to make a very clear foundational promise to you, the listener.
Yes, this is important.
We are about to deconstruct how political fake news operates, but we are doing so with absolute strict impartiality. Our role today is strictly forensic.
We're just looking at the mechanics.
Right. We are putting the machinery of cyber propaganda on the table and examining how the gears turn, regardless of who is operating the machine. We are not here to endorse, critique, validate, or invalidate any specific political ideology, left-wing, right-wing, or centrist candidate. We are solely focused on the architecture of the manipulation itself.
And that's crucial because the strategies we are analyzing are completely agnostic to political affiliation.
Yeah.
Cyber propaganda, which is the intentional use of digital platforms to manipulate public opinion, is a tool, and it's a highly effective one. The brief outlines its specific manifestations during election cycles. Things like the systematic deployment of false statements about candidates, fabricated quotes, deliberately misleading statistical data, and targeted rumors designed to actually confuse the physical voting process.
Well, I want to push back on this concept of cyber propaganda being treated as a novel, modern apocalypse. Let's play devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay, go for it.
Political mudslinging is literally as old as democracy. You look at the pamphlets circulated during the election of 1800 between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, and they were publishing absolute blatant fabrications about each other's character and policies.
Oh, it was brutal back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if politicians have been lying in newspapers and town squares for centuries, why is this brief treating cyber propaganda as a uniquely catastrophic threat?
It's a really fair historical comparison, but I think it misses the fundamental phase shift in the technology. The difference between an 1800s political pamphlet and modern cyber propaganda is basically the difference between a musket and a laser-guided missile.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It comes down to scale, velocity, and precision targeting. A pamphlet requires physical distribution. It has natural friction.
You literally have to hand it to someone.
Right. Cyber propaganda operates with zero friction. Furthermore, it exploits the modern phenomenon of the confirmation loop, which algorithms have accelerated to a degree previously impossible in human history.
Break down that confirmation loop in this context, because we know what confirmation bias is, believing what you want to believe. But how does the digital environment weaponize it?
Well, the digital environment doesn't just cater to your confirmation bias, it systematically maps it. If you harbor a strong bias against a particular candidate, you naturally seek out information that validates that negative feeling. In the past, you might read a partisan newspaper. Today, bad actors are using behavioral data to understand the precise contours of your political anger.
So they know exactly what buttons to push.
Exactly. They aren't just broadcasting a generic lie to millions of people and hoping it sticks. They are fabricating a specific quote, designed to trigger your specific grievances. And they're injecting it directly into a feed that the algorithm has already tailored to your psychological profile.
So it's not a broad net, it's a sniper rifle.
That's exactly what it is. When you see that fabricated quote, your brain experiences a rush of dopamine. It says, I knew it. This proves I was right about them all along.
And it feels good.
Feels great. And that dopamine rush completely short-circuits any desire to verify the source. The fake news is providing psychological validation, and organized groups exploit this biological response to alter voter behavior.
Which is incredibly dark. But maybe the darkest aspect highlighted in this analysis isn't even the character assassination. It's the rumors designed to confuse the voting process itself.
Yeah, the logistical rumors.
Because if a bad actor realizes they can't persuade you to change your vote, like if your confirmation bias is too locked in, they pivot to attacking the infrastructure of the democracy. They spread rumors that a specific polling location has closed, or that the election date has moved, or that certain machines are automatically deleting votes. They don't need to change your mind. They just need to introduce enough logistical friction to keep you home.
It's basically a denial of service attack, but applied to physical human beings trying to participate in a democratic system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But text-based rumors, a fake quote or a fake address, they still require us to read and comprehend. The next leap in this analysis shows that the technology has evolved to bypass reading entirely.
This is where it gets really sci-fi.
Right. It is targeting our most dominant evolutionary sense, our vision. We are dealing with an information landscape where seeing is quite literally no longer believing.
This is the intersection where our biological hardware proves drastically insufficient for the software we are currently running. We are talking about the deployment of misleading visual content, which the brief categorizes into 3 escalating tiers.
Let's walk through those tiers. Tier 1 is the edited or cropped image. This requires minimal technical skill but yields massive results by simply removing context.
Right, just zooming in on one angry face in a peaceful crowd.
Exactly. Then Tier 2 is the recycled image. Taking a photograph of a massive violent protest that happened a decade ago in a completely different hemisphere and sharing it with a caption claiming it's happening right now in your local downtown area.
Very common.
And then Tier 3 is the deepfake. Highly sophisticated, AI-generated video and audio showing real public figures doing or saying things that never actually occurred in physical reality.
Regardless of whether it's a simple crop or a complex neural network generating a deepfake, the underlying psychological objective is identical. Visuals bypass our intellectual defenses.
Yeah.
Visual content feels inherently, unarguably real.
I was trying to deconstruct why an image is so much more persuasive than a well-written article, and it really functions as a cognitive shortcut.
How?
Well, if I read a controversial paragraph, my brain has to engage in a complex decoding process. I have to translate the abstract symbols of the alphabet into words, parse the grammar, construct the meaning, and then actively use my imagination to visualize the scenario being described.
That takes processing power.
Exactly. That processing time creates a natural delay. It's a buffer zone where skepticism has time to tap me on the shoulder and say, wait, does this make sense? But an image completely annihilates that buffer zone. It sneaks right past the brain's security checkpoint.
Because for millions of years of hominid evolution, the optic nerve was our primary survival instrument. If you saw a predator in the tree line, your brain did not pause to run a peer-reviewed fact check on the lighting and shadows.
You didn't stop and ponder it.
No. Your visual cortex communicated instantly with your adrenal system, and you ran. We are biologically hardwired to process visual input as absolute, irrefutable, ground truth reality. The processing is instantaneous.
We are walking around with ancient brains trying to process synthetic realities.
Which is why debunking visual misinformation is such a monumental task. When you watch a high-quality deepfake of a world leader declaring war or a recycled video of a localized riot, your ancient wiring is screaming, "I am witnessing a physical event."
Your body physically reacts to it.
Right. And the newer logical part of your prefrontal cortex, the part that actually understands what artificial intelligence is, has to engage in an exhausting uphill battle against millions of years of evolutionary programming to convince you that what you are seeing isn't real. Yeah. That cognitive dissonance is incredibly taxing.
And the really terrifying part is that the lower tiers, the cropped and recycled images, they don't even require sophisticated AI. They require zero technical expertise. A bad actor doesn't need a supercomputer to manufacture outrage. They just need Google images and a malicious intent.
That's the scary part.
You change the caption and you literally rewrite reality for millions of people.
Which naturally brings up the question of distribution. If these images and manipulated texts are the payload, what exactly is the delivery system? How does a single recycled photograph from 2014 suddenly reach 3 million screens in a matter of hours?
That is the core of the analysis here, the anatomy of a viral lie. We have to map the spread mechanism. The brief defines this not as a linear progression, but as an exponential chain reaction.
It's explosive.
Right. It starts with the initial spark, the creation or editing of the false content. It's injected into a social media platform or a messaging app. Then comes the critical human failure point. People forward it without verifying.
And then the machine takes over.
Yes. The true accelerant, the thing that turns a spark into a forest fire, is the algorithm. The platform's algorithm detects the engagement and aggressively promotes the viral content, pushing it to thousands and then millions of users.
And governing this entire chain reaction is a single, brutal law of the modern digital ecosystem. Speed is greater than accuracy.
Speed over accuracy. Let's pause and really interrogate the role of the algorithm here. If a social media platform's primary directive is simply to keep a user engaged, to keep their eyes on the screen so they can be served more advertisements, does the algorithm actually possess an inherent bias toward fake news? Does the math actually prefer a lie over a boring, verified truth?
It's a chilling realization. But structurally, yes. Algorithms are highly optimized engines for spreading misinformation, not by conscious design, but by the nature of their metrics.
Can you explain that?
Sure. Consider the constraints of reality. Accurate news has speed limits. It is inherently constrained by the physical world. Reporting the truth requires investigation, fact-checking, nuance, and context. Reality is often incredibly complex, and frankly, sometimes it's just boring.
Yeah, reality rarely has a cliffhanger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But fake news has absolutely no speed limits because it is untethered from physical constraints. It is synthetic material, engineered in a psychological laboratory, specifically to be hyper-engaging. It is optimized for virality.
It's designed to be clicked.
Right. Now, an algorithm doesn't possess a moral compass. It cannot parse the philosophical difference between truth and deception. It only parses engagement data. It sees that a specific post is generating an unusually high volume of clicks, shares, and rapid-fire comments.
So it rewards it.
Yes. The machine interprets this as highly successful content and immediately broadens the distribution to maximize platform engagement.
So the algorithm is essentially a blind accelerator. It just feeds on the kinetic energy of human reaction. It doesn't care if the cart is driving off a cliff, as long as it's moving fast.
The machine is totally agnostic to truth, but it is deeply sensitive to human attention. And unfortunately, nothing captures human attention faster or more fiercely than engineered outrage. The architecture of a fabricated rumor aligns perfectly with the behavioral metrics the algorithm is programmed to reward.
That completely reframes the dynamic, but it forces us to look in the mirror, The algorithm serves the meal, but we are the ones eating it.
Yep, we're the ones clicking.
Why do we click? Why do we share it so enthusiastically? Why are we voluntarily providing the kinetic energy that feeds this machine? The material is explicit about this. Fake news is not an intellectual argument. It is a targeted attack on our emotions. It is designed to hijack the brain.
This might be the most crucial paradigm shift in the entire brief. We like to believe we are rational actors consuming information. We are not. The foundational principle operating here is that when emotional arousal is high, critical thinking capacity plummets.
I really want to unpack that phrase. When emotions are high, critical thinking becomes low. It sounds like an inverse correlation mapped on a graph. As the emotional temperature rises, the prefrontal cortex essentially powers down.
That's a very accurate way to visualize it.
The creators of cyber propaganda know this, and they utilize very specific emotional triggers to initiate that shutdown sequence. Let's dedicate some serious time to deconstructing these triggers, because this is the exact mechanism of manipulation. This is how the puppet strings are attached to you.
Let's break them down. The first and most prevalent trigger utilized is anger. The profound sense that this is deeply unfair.
Anger is an incredibly activating emotion. Think about how your body physically feels when you encounter a story about gross injustice. Maybe it's a fabricated story about a corrupt official brazenly stealing from a veterans charity, or a rumor that a rival demographic is receiving massive, unearned advantages.
Your blood pressure literally spikes.
Exactly. You feel a physical imperative to rectify the injustice. And in the digital space, the easiest way to quote-unquote do something about it is to amplify the outrage. Hitting the share button feels like a righteous act. You feel like you are exposing the villain.
The anger is what psychologists call a high arousal emotion. It demands immediate outward expression. From a neurological standpoint, profound anger triggers the limbic system and actively suppresses the executive functions of the prefrontal cortex.
You literally can't think straight.
You are biologically inhibited from thinking, let me cross-reference this claim with a secondary reputable news source. Your entire biological imperative is narrowed down to, my tribe needs to witness this outrage immediately.
It's weaponized righteousness. The next trigger is fear. The visceral message of you or your family are in imminent physical danger. We touched on this with the bank collapse rumor, but it extends far beyond financial fear.
Fear is the oldest and most primal lever you can pull in the human animal. If a bad actor injects a fabricated warning into a community group, say a rumor about a violent organized gang operating in a specific neighborhood, or a newly synthesized highly contagious virus spreading through the local water supply, they are activating the deepest survival mechanisms we possess.
The fight or flight response.
Exactly. When you are terrified, your focus narrows exclusively to threat mitigation. Skepticism is viewed as a luxury you cannot afford. You forward the warning to protect your network.
It's the digital equivalent of screaming fire in a crowded theater. The panic is the point. Now, the next trigger listed is hatred, specifically targeting marginalized groups or rival communities.
Which is incredibly grim.
It is grim, but historically consistent. Tapping into deep-seated bigotry or tribal animosity is a manipulation tactic as old as human civilization. It just moves faster now. And the trigger after that is shock. The classic, you won't believe what just happened clickbait structure designed to exploit our innate novelty-seeking behavior.
We all fall for those.
We really do, but there is one trigger nestled in this list that I really want to push you on. Anger, fear, hatred, shock. Those are all dark, high arousal states. But right in the middle of that list is sympathy. Help this poor person.
Yeah.
Why on earth would malicious actors weaponize kindness? It seems completely counterintuitive to the goals of a bad actor.
It seems counterintuitive until you recognize the sheer brilliance of the manipulation.
No.
Weaponizing sympathy is arguably the most insidious and sophisticated tactic on the entire list. It's an exploit of our highest moral virtues.
Walk me through how they do that.
Consider the standard architecture of this trap. You see a heart-wrenching photograph of a severely ill child in a hospital bed attached to text that claims, for every single time this is shared, a major corporation will donate $1 to fund this child's life-saving surgery.
Oh, it's the digital chain letter. I guarantee everyone listening to this has encountered some variation of that exact post.
Exactly. Now analyze why it is so successful. It is a psychological trap that uses your own morality as the lock.
Wow.
If you pause to investigate the origin of the photo like, if you attempt to fact-check the sick child, you inevitably feel a twinge of guilt. You feel cynical, cold-hearted, and uncharitable. The architect of the fake post understands this dynamic perfectly.
They know you won't check it because you don't want to feel like a bad person.
Precisely. They are banking on the fact that your fundamental desire to be a decent, helpful human being will completely override your critical thinking faculties. They're exploiting your empathy to bypass your security systems.
Wow. It's basically a microtransaction of heroism.
That's exactly what it is.
It costs you absolutely nothing in terms of physical effort or money to click share, but your brain rewards you with a microdose of feeling like a savior. You feel like you've contributed to a tangible good. But in reality, what is the creator of that post actually doing?
They're building a network.
Right. They are farming your sympathy for engagement. They are building a massive audience network based on thousands of well-meaning shares, which they will eventually pivot to sell counterfeit goods, distribute malware, or peddle actual political propaganda once the network is large enough.
They are using the warmth of your compassion as fuel for a malicious network. It is the purest illustration of the core principle we talked about. High emotion, even a beautifully positive, noble emotion like deep sympathy, suppresses rational logic.
That is wild.
The exact moment you feel an overwhelming, almost physical urge to click share, whether that urge is born out of furious indignation, sheer terror, or profound, heart-wrenching compassion, that is the precise moment you are most vulnerable. That is the moment you are about to become an active, unthinking node in a misinformation network.
That is a deeply sobering realization. Our finest traits can be hijacked just as easily as our worst instincts. It makes you look at your own digital behavior through a completely different lens.
Which is necessary because we have to bridge the gap between digital behavior and physical consequences. This stuff isn't contained in a vacuum.
Right. And that leads us to the real-world fallout. Because it is incredibly tempting, especially for people who consider themselves digitally literate, to dismiss all of this as ephemeral internet drama.
Like it's just pixels on a screen.
Exactly. Who really cares if your aunt forwards a fake quote about hot water? Who cares if someone farms a few thousand likes using a recycled hospital photo? It's just pixels, right? But the emotional hijacking we just spent so much time dissecting does not stay on the screen. It bleeds directly into our physical reality, causing devastating, measurable societal damage.
The material is completely uncompromising on this reality. We're not talking about bruised egos or annoying arguments in comment sections here. The brief outlines 5 catastrophic real-world consequences that stem directly from this architecture of misinformation, and we need to examine the mechanics of each one.
Let's go through the fallout. The first consequence listed is public panic. The brief notes that false health information or disaster news can engineer massive physical chaos.
We've definitely seen that happen.
We witnessed the mechanics of this during the early days of the global pandemic. Connecting it back to the hot water cure example we discussed earlier, it doesn't stay a harmless piece of folk wisdom. It escalates into rumors about fake remedies or fabricated shortages of critical medical supplies, leading people to make catastrophic medical decisions or hoard vital resources based entirely on WhatsApp forwards.
And consider the disaster scenario we touched on with the fear trigger. Imagine a localized rumor begins circulating that a major dam is structurally failing during a severe storm.
Oh, man.
Right, and the digital spread outpaces the local government's ability to issue a denial. The result? A mass panic. Citizens attempt to flee simultaneously, clogging major evacuation arteries and preventing genuine emergency medical services and disaster relief from navigating the city. The fabricated digital threat engineers a very real physical catastrophe. The panic itself becomes a localized disaster.
The second consequence is violence and conflict. The material specifically highlights how unverified rumors can rapidly escalate into mob violence or severe community clashes.
This is the physical manifestation of the hatred and fear triggers we discussed. When you look at documented tragic case studies globally, from localized lynchings in India, fueled by WhatsApp rumors of child abductions, to ethnic violence in Myanmar accelerated by Facebook, to community clashes right here in the West, driven by fabricated stories of targeted crime, the pattern is identical.
It's the same formula everywhere.
Yes. A fabricated rumor is injected into a closed network. It triggers primal tribal fears. And because of the velocity of the digital spread, a physical, violent mob can mobilize in a matter of hours, long before local law enforcement or journalists can even identify the source of the rumor, let alone debunk it. The speed of the lie physically outpaces the speed of the truth.
It's horrifying. The third consequence listed is political manipulation, which is the ultimate goal of the cyber propaganda we deconstructed earlier. The tragic endpoint where voters are casting actual, legally binding ballots based on highly engineered, fabricated realities If a significant percentage of the electorate is making civic decisions based on deepfakes, recycled images, and confirmation loop manipulation, the entire foundational premise of democratic representation is compromised. You aren't measuring the will of the people, you are measuring the efficacy of the manipulation.
Which leads directly into the fourth consequence, and from a sociological standpoint, this is arguably the most insidious long-term damage of all. The loss of trust.
A loss of trust.
Yes. The systematic decay where a society fundamentally stops believing in its institutions, its media, and eventually in each other.
I was trying to contextualize the magnitude of that specific consequence, and the analogy that kept coming back to me is an autoimmune disease.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Fake news doesn't function like a standard biological virus that simply attacks the host and leaves. It functions like an autoimmune disease. In an autoimmune disorder, the body's own internal defense mechanisms become deeply confused, and the immune system begins actively attacking healthy, vital cells.
Right. It turns on itself.
Exactly. Fake news makes a community attack itself. It fundamentally degrades the connective tissue of shared trust and objective reality that holds society together.
That is a phenomenal conceptual framework. And we really need to emphasize why this specific loss of trust is so terminal for a functioning society. A complex civilization relies entirely on a shared baseline of empirical reality.
We have to agree on basic facts.
We do. We don't have to agree on policy, economics, or morality, but we absolutely must agree on the basic physical facts of existence. If this unregulated fire hose of sophisticated misinformation makes us so deeply cynical that we default to believing everything is a lie, if a citizen can look at raw, unedited footage of a historical atrocity and casually dismiss it as probably a deepfake.
Which happens all the time now.
It does. Or if they look at rigorously peer-reviewed scientific data and dismiss it as just a partisan conspiracy, then the very foundation of community crumbles. If we lose the capacity to agree on what is fundamentally real, we completely lose the capacity to solve actual physical problems. We enter a state of societal paralysis.
Paralysis by paranoia. We are so terrified of being manipulated that we reject reality itself. And just to round out the briefs list of consequences, the fifth point is financial scams.
Right, going back to the lures.
This is the direct fallout from the government scheme lures. It is people being tricked into handing over their resources. It isn't just a digital annoyance. It is a senior citizen losing their pension or a family losing their rent money because they clicked a malicious link forwarded by a trusted relative.
It's the extraction of real-world wealth based on digital deception. The physical fallout is undeniable across all 5 vectors.
All right. We have mapped the entire battlefield. We've examined the proximity of the threat in our messaging apps. We've analyzed the precision weaponry of cyber propaganda and visual manipulation.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. We've deconstructed the engine of virality, exploiting algorithmic speed and hijacking our deepest emotional triggers. And we have witnessed the devastating societal casualties that result from it. The picture is dark.
Very dark.
But it's time to pivot the conversation. How do we armor up? How do we take this understanding and forge it into a practical defense? That brings us to the final and perhaps most vital aspect of our deep dive: building the shield and developing the verification habit.
The source material elevates this concept above everything else we've discussed, because despite the sheer scale of the architecture, despite the billion-dollar algorithms, the sophisticated AI generation, and the organized global networks of propaganda, the ultimate decisive power still resides with the individual human user.
It's still up to us.
The chain reaction of virality requires your active participation to function.
The brief provides a foundational safety rule. It originates from a specific public awareness campaign highlighted in the material, centered on a phrase that translates roughly to pause and verify before sharing.
The pause. That is the critical intervention point.
It is genuinely fascinating to me. We have spent an hour discussing the cutting edge of artificial intelligence, the complexity of global neural networks, algorithmic engagement metrics, and industrialized psychological manipulation.
All this high-tech stuff.
Right. And yet, the most powerful, effective countermeasure isn't a complex new piece of software. It isn't a government firewall or a blockchain verification system. It is literally just the ancient biological human act of pausing.
Just stopping for a second.
The antidote to the law of speed over accuracy is simply choosing to slow down.
Breaking the circuit. You have to remember the physiological mechanics we discussed earlier. Fake news relies entirely on high emotional arousal to bypass your logical defenses. The rush of anger, fear, or sympathy suppresses your prefrontal
So
cortex.
you have to wait for that to pass?
Exactly. By actively forcing yourself to pause, taking a physical breath, stepping away from the screen for 60 seconds, you give your neurochemistry a chance to reset, you allow the adrenaline to dissipate, and as the emotion drops, your critical thinking faculties re-engage. You bring your logical brain back online.
And once you've paused and brought your logic back online, the brief provides a very specific tactical mental checklist to run through before your thumb ever gets near that send button.
The 4 questions.
Yes, 4 foundational questions. Question 1, is the source actually trusted? And we need to clarify what that means. It doesn't mean, do I trust the uncle who sent this to me? It means, can I identify the original entity that published this information?
Right, you have to trace the artifact back to its root origin. Question 2 is the natural follow-up. Can I find this identical information reported on reputable, established platforms?
Lateral reading.
Exactly, the fundamental practice of lateral reading. Don't stare intensely at the single post, trying to divine its truth. Open a new browser tab. If a major financial institution is actually collapsing tomorrow morning, that reality will not be exclusively confined to a forwarded text message in your family group chat.
It would be everywhere.
It will be the leading headline on every major global financial news network.
Yeah.
If the claim is massive, but you cannot find independent corroboration anywhere else on the internet, you are almost certainly looking at a fabricated artifact.
Question 3 specifically addresses the visual manipulation we discussed. Is this image or video original, or has it been altered or taken out of context? Now, admittedly, with the rapid advancement of AI generation, this is getting exponentially harder for the naked eye to determine.
It's tough, but not impossible.
Right, there are still investigative tools available to the average user.
The brief highly recommends utilizing reverse image search technology. It takes seconds. You upload the suspicious photo or video frame into a search engine, and it indexes the entire internet to show you every prior instance where that specific image has been published.
It's like a superpower.
It really is. It is the fastest way to instantly discover that the shocking current event photo that just made your blood boil is actually a documented photograph from a completely unrelated sporting riot that occurred 7 years ago on a different continent. You shatter the false context immediately.
And finally, question 4, which elegantly brings our entire psychological analysis full circle. Does this content sound or feel excessively emotional or purposefully shocking?
That is the ultimate internal alarm system. If you read a headline or view an image and it immediately provokes an intense, overwhelming, almost physical surge of pure rage, sheer terror, or agonizing sympathy, that is precisely the moment you must be the most profoundly suspicious.
Because you're being played.
Exactly. That physiological reaction is the red flag. The content is actively attempting to hack your neurochemistry.
So the practical, everyday action steps are remarkably straightforward. Google the core claims of the headline, utilize independent fact-checking databases, verify the original publication dates and sources, and run reverse image searches on provocative visuals.
But I want to elevate this beyond just a list of personal digital hygiene tips. Building and maintaining this verification habit is fundamentally a modern civic duty.
A civic duty. I like that.
We discussed the mathematics of the viral spread, how a single unverified forward can geometrically expand to mislead hundreds or thousands of individuals, potentially culminating in real-world panic, violence, or democratic erosion. By choosing to exercise that pause, by actively choosing to be the resilient node in the network where the flow of misinformation is halted, you are actively protecting your community. Refusing to participate in the chain reaction is a quiet, profound, everyday act of civic heroism.
A quiet act of heroism. Simply choosing not to hit send. I think that is an incredibly powerful framing. Well, we have covered a massive expanse of territory today. Let's briefly retrace the arc of the journey we've been on with you.
Let's do it.
We began by examining the intimate Trojan horse danger of our own messaging networks, how blind trust in our loved ones makes us vulnerable to accidental misinformation. We explored the deliberate, industrialized weaponization of those networks during elections, deconstructing how cyber propaganda exploits our inherent confirmation biases with sniper-like precision.
We analyze the technological subversion of our visual cortex, how cropped context and deepfakes bypass millions of years of evolutionary logic. We mapped the exponential chain reaction of the viral spread, fueled by a digital ecosystem that ruthlessly prioritizes velocity over veracity.
We took a deep dive into the underlying neurochemistry of the manipulation, uncovering how engineered triggers of anger, fear, and even our most noble sympathies are utilized to bypass our critical thinking. We confronted the severe physical fallout of these digital illusions, the manufactured panics, the localized violence, the extraction of wealth, and the terrifying autoimmune decay of societal trust.
And finally, we armed you with a methodology of defense, the profound power of the pause, lateral reading, and the civic duty of verification.
It is a dense, complex architecture to process, but recognizing the shape of the machine is the absolute prerequisite to dismantling its influence over your life.
Absolutely.
Now, before we officially sign off, we always like to leave you with a final, provocative concept to mull over on your own, an extrapolation that builds on the foundation of what we've unpacked today.
We have spent a significant amount of time today discussing the burden of responsibility. Currently, that burden rests squarely on us, the human users, to actively pause, investigate, and verify the information we consume. But let's project this trajectory into the near future.
Okay, looking ahead.
If the fundamental architecture of the digital world continues to ruthlessly optimize for speed over accuracy, and the underlying algorithms become increasingly sophisticated at rewarding these precise emotional triggers, the sheer volume and velocity of synthetic misinformation is going to scale exponentially.
It's just going to get faster and denser.
Right. We may rapidly approach a threshold where the fire hose of generated reality becomes entirely too dense and too fast for human critical thinking to manually filter. Will we inevitably reach a cultural point where we are forced to employ our own personal, localized AI assistants to pre-read and verify our incoming messages before our human eyes ever see them,
Wow.
just to safely filter our own family group chats? And if we do reach that paradigm, how does outsourcing our perception of truth to a machine, relying on an algorithm to tell us if our own loved ones are accidentally deceiving us, fundamentally alter what it actually means to connect with another human being?
Man, that is a heavy, structurally profound question to leave hanging in the air. The concept of handing the ultimate X-ray machine of objective truth over to artificial intelligence just to survive a conversation with our families. Well, we hope this extensive deep dive has provided you with some genuine, clarifying aha moments today. We hope you walk away from this feeling significantly more confident, acutely more aware of the invisible forces at play in your digital environment, and fully prepared to be that quiet, civic hero who utilizes the power of the pause. Thank you so much for joining us on this vital journey today. Until next time, stay deeply curious and verify, verify, verify.